Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and that is a very dramatic graphic you see in front of you, and for good reason. I want to get your attention on this because this is probably pretty important. Unity have just released a security alert and a patch to basically every version of Unity under the sun over a fairly important security vulnerability that has been detected. So I figured I would use as aggressive a graphic as I could to get the word out to all of you because you all got some patching to do. And unfortunately, that patching has a few ramifications, as we will see in a second. So what the heck am I talking about? Well, if you follow Unity on Twitter, you got this following tweet recently. To all Unity users, we have rolled out a critical security patch for the remote code execution flaw we identified in the editor. Your security is very important to us, so we urge you to please head to our security page for patch instructions and details. And here we go. We are at said security page, and I got it. And you can see it is a remote code execution exploit. It was discovered in November 15th of last year. It was patched as of today. It is for Windows only, so yes, you Mac and Linux users get to be a little bit smug about security again. So all versions of Windows are affected, and all versions of Unity are affected. So that is sort of a downside. So don't worry too much about the version of Unity because frankly, if you are running on Windows, you need to update the install. To do so, fairly simple. Just go to Help and check for updates, and it will find the new security patch for you. You can download and install the corresponding patch for your version of the Unity editor as well. Download links are available in the patch versions of the vulnerability details section and in the references section at the bottom. There's also a mitigation tool for people that are running versions of Unity that are older than what are patched here. And I believe they are patching back to 5.6, but we'll get that in a second. So what kind of vulnerability was it? An input string validation issue was identified that could lead to remote code execution as a part of Unity's responsible disclosure program. Additional details will be considered to be released to the public after consumers have had time to apply the updates. So that means there's probably more security ramifications, but they want to get as many people patched as possible. A remote code execution basically means generally, and you're seeing here an input string validation issue, that's normally a buffer overflow. And what you can do is send information to the editor that it overflows the number of characters as expected, and then it can run code, arbitrary code, on that user's computer. So we don't know the exact details of this exploit, but generally that is the problem with a remote code execution. It allows people to find that bug, and by exploiting that bug, run code locally on your device. Again, there are a lot of specific details of what is affected and not that we don't know yet. For example, like how can this be remotely exploited? You know, do you have to be on the same network to be able to run this code? Those are big details, and I wish we actually knew them if you knew how important it is to do this update. Does this vulnerability affect built games applications in any way? No, only the Unity editor is affected. It is only on Windows. Again, Mac and Linux people can be a bit smug today. What versions of Windows are affected? All of them. What versions of Unity are affected? All of them. What versions of the editor are being patched? So here we go. They are patching all versions up to from 5.6 up to 2019.2 alpha. I'm assuming all new binaries you download from day forward will already be pre-patched. If you are running a version older than this, well, we'll get to that in a second. Blah, blah, blah. What versions are for older than 5.6, they have a mitigation tool that disables the identified vulnerable feature of the Unity editor. However, this is not a patch and has limitations. It will disable the editor feature identified as vulnerable since we cannot control whether this functionality will be re-enabled at some point after applying the mitigation. We strongly recommend updating to a fixed version of Unity editor. So in other words, they basically got rid of the vulnerability by nuking said vulnerability, which, you know what, 5.6 is probably reasonably far back. Now, there are a couple of downsides here thereafter. Will I need to rebuild asset bundles due to the update requirement? And unfortunately, it seems like it depends on the specific version of the Unity editor that you're using. Most customers will be able to update to the patch version without needing to rebuild their bundles, but some customers may find that asset importers have been updated between the versions that are currently using and the patch for that .release. For those customers, asset bundle rebuilding may be necessary. And how do I know if I need to rebuild my asset bundles? You may need to rebuild your asset bundles if any assets are re-imported when you first open your project in the patch version of the Unity editor. And here are the specific versions. So there's a patch for 2019.2 A7, 2019.1, 2018.3.2, 2017.4, and 5.6.71. And of course, they have the mitigation tool available there as well, as long as the guide that goes with it. To download the asset, literally just click your platform, which once again is all Windows platforms, and it will download the executable required for the update. And yeah. So again, we don't know the exact details of this vulnerability. They seem to be treating it bad enough that you probably should go ahead and update. I'm always running basically the most current version, so I'm pretty okay with this. Every time I do a new video or whatever, I generally update to the newest version I can. But if you are using Unity in a daily capacity, you really do want to pay attention to this. If you're using it very, very, very rarely, well, you still want to pay attention to this, but you don't need to lose sleep. Unity needs to be running in order for this exploit to happen. So if you never use Unity, well, in some ways you're invulnerable from this exploit because your Unity executable will never be up and going. But for anybody that's using Unity on a regular basis, I highly recommend you take this seriously and get the patch updated. Now, I am going to be interested. The biggest thing, once again, is we do not know the full extent of the exploits. So this is the part that worries me probably the most, is that we are not in a position to share the full details. We don't really know how serious this exploit is, if it could like literally take over your computer and compromise all your data, if it's remotely executable. Obviously, it's a remote vulnerability, but you know, how dangerous is this? Could this be exploited by a worm and spread automatically? If that's the case, patch up yesterday, because this is very, very serious. If you need to be on the same network in order to access it, and a very specific version and sculpting, it's not that much of a vulnerability, but unfortunately we don't know. And while we don't know, that means err on the side of security and get patched if you can. All right, so hopefully you're not all too affected. Hopefully this isn't too much of a black eye to Unity. It kind of sucks that these things take like 3 months to get out there. This could have been 3 months of exploitation, but that's pretty normal when it comes to bug releases. So let me know, are you going to be patching? Are you moving away from Unity because of this kind of thing? I think that might be a little drastic. Security concerns happen everywhere, unfortunately. When you got millions of lines of code, you're going to have an exploit or two in there, and that's the world we live in. At least that's my opinion on this. But of course, you could think this is the final straw in your case. I'd be interested in seeing or hearing what your actual opinion of this is. Do you like the way they're dealing with it? Do you dislike this vagueness? Now, I understand why they're being secure, to let people know that how insecure they are, until people actually patch this thing in. But I also don't like not knowing how severe this is. But you can tell by their wording and so on that it is definitely considered critical. It is an important update, and the severity is in fact high. So do patch your machine. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.